Hello and welcome to Raising Resilient Minds. I'm Dr. Jihan and I have the privilege of having a guest today, Dr. Darron Lamkin. And so instead of reading his bio, I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about himself.
Yeah, so first, thank you for this opportunity. I always love to join and support you all vision in any way, shape, or form. So,
Mhm.
my name is Dr. Darren. I'm a Oklahoma City native, and I decided to create a ministry for myself, and that is Class Matters. In addition to that, I do youth medical mentorship. So, Class Matters promotes STEM education for high school and elementary is STEAM, and youth medical mentorship promotes health science and medicine to under-resourced and underprivileged youth.
Yes, and those are I love those. And of course, just in terms of just sharing a little bit about your background, your education. And so, if you don't mind, just sharing a little bit about that too.
Yeah, so I'm an engineer. I actually work for the Boeing company. I do what's called software configuration management, and Scrum Master, product owners. Essentially, my job is to break the code and make sure it works on the plane before it gets on the plane, so that everything talks and is compatible with each other. So my job is to make sure that all the systems are communicating and working, so that when there is a mission, everything is intact and our team is units are ready. So that's engineering. I do things efficiently and make it better. So that's engineering.
Right. And Dr. Lampkin, I don't call him Darren or DJ. So if y'all hear me say that, that's,
Yeah.
over the year. What made you, because, you became an engineer and then you decided to go back to school
Yeah.
and did your PhD. And so what made you do
Man, that's a great question.
that?
So for me, every time I reached another level, there was a barrier. And so I wanted to remove all those barriers of access. And so I got the highest degree, which is the PhD from a research perspective. So now they can't tell me no. And now they had to come up with a better reason why they can't support. So it was just to disprove some ignorance. I wanted to prove that regardless of where you come from, regardless of your parents' education level, with resilience, you can overcome and persevere.
Definitely. And I love that story so much. So just tying that in, how would you define resiliency?
So, resilience to me is understanding your why well enough to go after it with a vengeance. And regardless of who doesn't believe, as long as you believe and you stay the course, you attain it over time. So resilience is rest if you must, but don't you quit.
Yeah, I like that. So, a new mantra: rest if you must, but you must not quit. So, it's so important because one of the things that I have noticed over the years, and one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast is because I realized that so many of our children do not have that skill of resiliency, right? And so, they're not even trying. Some of them, they don't see that future. Some of them, if something goes wrong in their lives, are not able to bounce back. It just kind of crumbles their world. And I feel like today's day and age is very, very different. But I feel like we have a huge role to play in that as parents, as mentors, as community leaders, and helping to actually develop this resiliency in youth. And so, one of the things that I noticed through your organization, for instance, Class Matters, is there's certain things that you guys put in place to help students better understand one failure, but then learning from your failures and becoming a little bit more resilient. So, can you kind of share what that model or kind of how you all developed that or what you're doing with Class Matters um, in that aspect?
Um, so you got to think of failure being a part of the process. So as an engineer, I know that in order to make something better and improve it, you have to be able to do it at least 3 times to make it a system. And so promoting a an environment that says, "Hey, it isn't over until you stop making the effort." And so effort is when you do it to the best of your ability. So teaching them that their best is more than enough. And because some people have that identity issues to where they feel like they're not good enough, but I believe we all were created, and so we're naturally creators. So we all were supposed to create something.
Got you. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So we're supposed to be able to rely on that creativity and kind of go beyond that information. And it's so important that our youth understand that aspect of being creative, because I think that it's interesting. I've had so many say, "Oh, I want to be a YouTuber or
Right.
whatever," and I'm like, "Well,
Right.
what are you going to teach me about,
Right.
or what's special about you?" And they're
Yeah.
like, "I don't
I
know."
don't know.
And I'm like, okay, so we're lacking that creativity there, right? How about we brainstorm? How about you write it down? What are some things, and it's just very interesting to see how you see something that you may want, but you may not necessarily understand the pathway that goes along with it, which is, that's a part of exploration as a child. I do feel like so many children, when you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? They're like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
At all. Like that creativity aspect is missing. Why do you think that is? I mean,
Yeah, it starts with the dinner table conversation, and it doesn't happen anymore. Everyone eats in their own area separately, and so there's no accountability. There's no crucial conversation. There's no critical thinking because all they have is themselves. You got so many people trying to be individuals that forget that in order to be an individual, you must be an individual. And so being an individual is not saying I'm the first. Being an individual is actually being true to yourself and actually getting to know yourself. And people are not doing that because we in a world in a TikTok where it's okay to be a copy instead of an original. Mm-hmm. And so when you create individuals to say I'm a future this, then they actually have to reflect and say, is that possible? If so, what are the steps I need to take? And so that lacking of critical thinking and that lack of accountability, because me telling you, hey, you're not supposed to do that. Oh, you judging me.
That's true. And I wonder where we got that concept of you're judging me when it's critiquing, right? So it's so hard, right? So we talk about critique, and we used to always say the concept of constructive criticism. Absolutely. And a lot of people don't like that term because they're like, why are you criticizing? And I understand that. So the better statement would be constructive critiquing. Ooh, right?
I like that.
And so, but nowadays, if you critique, it's like, well, I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
And so there's this image of perfection. And I'm like, why would you be perfect? Like, you haven't lived life. You haven't tried to do anything. Like, why would you be a master of all of these things when that's not how the world works. There's this idea of perfectionism, or you can't correct me, is really hindering a lot of our youth.
Oh, yeah. And I feel like perfection is a myth. I believe that you can be perfect, but you can't be persistent. You can be consistent. You can show up. You can be disciplined. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of those attributes are lacking because they're being coddled, right? And it's like, not my baby. And it's like, yeah, that's your baby. Your baby did that without consequences. And so we live in a world where I can do whatever without consequences. So then you grow up as an adult with childlike behavior, and now you're getting adult consequences. So we really need to go back to an environment where discipline and accountability was engraved in the culture.
Yeah, because I mean, our parents wouldn't have survived, right? Just thinking of the era that they grew up in. Like, if you wouldn't have been accountable or been able to correct, that could have been very, very detrimental to you. And so it's really important that, we find ways of helping our children to do that. And so I know, for example, myself, I will often, if my children make a mistake or something like that, I'm like, oh, I didn't do this. And I sit down and say, first of all, we need to be honest with ourselves. Mm. And secondly, why couldn't you have made that mistake?
Yeah.
Right. And then, oh, well, maybe I did, or maybe I wasn't right. Okay. So you weren't correct. Do you think you're always correct? You're not going to always be correct. So how do we learn to be able to accept when someone says, Dad, guess what? You were wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't know everything.
Yeah, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
And you'll see so many of these kids going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with their parents, their teachers, their principals, because they're like, well, no, I know. And you're like, baby, you don't know. Take that time, take that opportunity to step back and listen. And that's what we don't. Kids just go. They just go. And the thing is that if you sit or you're on your phone all day and you get video after video, different things, right? Different topics, different emotions.
Yeah.
Your brain is like,
what do you want me to do?
You don't even listen. And half the time I'm like, what did you watch? I don't even know, because that concept of just pausing and listening is something that we're really missing. So that brings me to one of my questions, because you guys obviously have a program for future people in the medical profession, right?
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that I know I have to do as a physician is listen. How is that, a skill or something that you all in your program are trying to help these young people better understand?
Oh, no, that's a great question. So there's a thing called 21st century learning skills. And within that is conflict resolution. And within that is also critical thinking, and then also speaker listening. And so a lot of people hear, but very few people listen. So teaching them the speaker listen concept, coping skills, and things to help them with character development. Because sometimes your biggest competition is a person in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And if you are always wearing this hoodie to not see yourself or not be seen to be the invisible person, then you never get to the point where, hey, I'm okay with the person I'm becoming. So it's all about the present you considering the future you.
The present you considering the future you. And how do the youth embrace or, feel about that when you ask them that? I mean, it's not an easy thing. Most, adults have struggled with that, right? Yeah. We want to change the way we look. We want to put a filter on everything. We're not even comfortable looking at ourselves.
Oh, absolutely. So being intentional. And so I've learned that long-term goal setting is very difficult for so many people. So instead of teaching long-term, I just focus on short-term goal setting and giving them not necessarily kudos, but way to go. Yes. So that in between kudos, yes, I have children. You give me kudos for getting my daughter diapers. I'm supposed to get diapers. It's my job. Mm-hmm. Why do I need to be applauded for that? But we live in a mediocrity that I want to apply you for doing what you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. I don't want to give you kudos for going to class. I mean, you're supposed to go to class. Right. You're supposed to go to class. I want to say way to go for knowing the areas where you struggle with marijuana, distractions from the other counterparts, different things that distract you from being the best version of you and creating those boundaries. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like if we were to say, wow, I'm so proud of you for not being distracted. Right. Right. And being focused. Yeah, being focused, because it's very difficult. Mm-hmm. Like you're competing with so much. Matter of fact, we're competing with sympathy right now. Oh, I had someone die. I had someone die yesterday. Matter of fact, 3 people died. And so you're in this constant tug of war with, I can't really express myself because somebody's going to want to, because we the biggest sinful nature right now is attention. Everybody's seeking attention and willing to do anything and everything to exploit themselves to be seen. And to me, the world is lacking peace. The world is lacking love, specifically self-care. Right, and that empathy and sympathy. And I don't think they don't know that patients and families in which a grandparent passed away or something, right? Mm. And I'm thinking, have they been able to process this? Do they go to grief therapy or grief, groups or anything like that? And the parents are like, why? Why? I didn't. I've never done that. It's a part of life. It's part of life. And I'm like, it is a part of life. Yeah. But it's something that we may need to talk about and actually process so that we do it in a healthy manner versus we just hold it in and then 2-3 years later you're coming in and you're like, he won't come out of his room. Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah.
And I'm like, because maybe we never processed. And I know in our world, in medicine, that was one of our big complaints as residents. I'll never forget, I trained in Atlanta, Grady Hospital, trauma cases right and left, right?
Wow.
And I'll never forget these young African-American males who their van or something like hit a pole or something like that. And so it like smashed kind of one of them, like the steering wheel. And so it broke his pelvis.
Wow.
And so when it did that, it actually severed one of the major arteries, right? So he's bleeding internally, but he didn't look horribly, but we could see that it was feeling, right? And I'll never forget because we took him to the OR. When we opened him up, it was, I'm not going to be graphic with you guys, but anyhow, it wasn't a good sight. Finally, we stabilized him, packed him, moved him out, and then he started to code. And I never forget, I was the only person actually standing there, so I had to start CPR and all these things. Long story short, he passed. We weren't able to say, we were probably like 17 or something. So not old. So it was very, it was hard for me because I'm like this young man. And I'll never forget, they were like, okay, now we need to go talk to the family and let them know their loved one passed. So I went with my attendings. We did that. And then afterwards, they were like, all right, I'll meet y'all in the lounge later. I'm going to get some food.
Yeah.
I was like, are we not going to discuss this? Like, this was traumatic for me.
Yeah.
And over the years, we've gotten better, right? And they're like, okay, when you lose patience, we need to stop. We need to help you to process that. But I see these kids experiencing just as traumatic of, things, and there's no processing. There's no processing at all. And I mean, this is, 17, 18 years later. And if I'm still like, might think about it and things. But it's one of those situations where we have to learn how to make our minds a priority, our mental health a priority. Ooh. That's why I'm like, I have to get, ahead of some things because I think that our communities just don't want to acknowledge it. And it doesn't help that most of our video games and things are, we're just shooting people. Right. Staring at your face and you're like, that doesn't help because it kind of desensitizes you to some things. And I'm like, some of these kids need to process even what they're playing.
Yeah. It's, how would you define the difference between sympathy and empathy in your role?
So sympathy, to me is, it's more like kind of passing that, like I kind of understand where you're coming from,
gotcha.
Things like that, right? And so I'm sympathetic to what you're going through, but I'm not like completely delving myself into the situation.
Gotcha.
Whereas empathy is when you're feeling it. You got to be real careful, like the empaths, because they'll take that on themselves and they hold it and they need to process it as well. I think that sympathy is it's different, and I think that there's a place for us to learn sympathy and empathy. But if we are empathetic, we also have to know how to not, hold on to being really feeling what somebody else is feeling. What's your take on it?
So, just tying it together. So for me, as an empath, I realized that I had to do better and learn self-care intentionally. So that's why I'm fasting now, to really be intentional and be okay with the rejection and letting people down and things of that nature. Because if I'm not okay, my household isn't. So I got to do better with taking care of me so I can do better taking care of my household. Because having daughters, they are very in tune with you. They know you better than you know yourself. And so I just want to continue to be someone that can be proud to call their father. And so for me, I'm going to give an example. I had a student go down to Georgia, and this was a student that was turning the corner. Just had a child, and made a phone call to the people that's my sponsor, who I bank with for the nonprofit, and they hired him as a tell. So he's turning the corner. And then he goes down to Georgia and gets killed. And it's like, you got this baby and you turn the corner, but it's like, boom. And so as an impact, it's like, oh, it's like every time. And so it has to be an environment where we sit and say, hey, I know that's your nature, but you don't have to go backwards to go forward. Just go forward. And so that's where I'm at, just encouraging people to not focus so much on the past, but look forward.
And that's all we really can do. We learn from our past, right? And making sure that our children don't just ignore the past.
Oh, yeah.
Right? We learn from it, but we have to keep moving, because if you just stay, in those settings, then life is very, very difficult. And
yes,
I think that's resiliency, when you're able to move past, right? Instead of, it's like and tug of war, right? Yeah. And if you're staying back here, then you're not demonstrating that, like that ability to go ahead and push yourself and to realize, where you've come from, where you're going, especially your children, right? Yeah. So people forget, like, even at 4 and 5, they have memories. They remember things.
Oh, yeah.
And if we just, when you were 8, you did this. It's like, but I'm 11 now. Right? Yeah. So even mom and dad, let's not dwell in my past, and let's help me push forward. And you may say, well, in 3rd grade, remember you were acting a fool. Yeah. But I haven't acted a fool in 2 years. So can we give me some of that grace? Can we help me to see me in a different light? And so as parents, it's very important that we don't get caught up in the past, and that we see our children for who they are at the moment. Right? And that's not easy, because you're like, but I remember. Yeah, that's great. You have memories. I
love that.
But you have to figure out ways of kind of extending and helping them. So, in terms of, you have a lot of youth in your program who they are mentors, and you're teaching them to be leaders. And then they also are mentoring and leading others, right? And so what are some of the qualities or things that you may have seen in a child who others wouldn't have seen as a leader, but you were able to see something in them, or kind of help them turn that around to where now you're able to put them in front and things like that? What are some things that you noticed?
So to me, in order to be a leader, sometimes you got to be a better follower. Mm-hmm. So if you can take instructions, you can give instructions. Mm-hmm. If you can take direction, you can give direction. But some of these people claim to be leaders, but no one's following them. Mm-hmm. So encouraging them that to be seen and to be heard is also to be respected, and to also to have a vision. Mm-hmm. So I teach them how to plan their work and work their plan. And then the biggest thing that I have to look for is showing up, because part of opportunities and obtaining opportunities is not given to anyone. It's given to the one that shows up consistently. So teaching them how to show up and what showing up looks like. And the ones that show up, the ones that have service hours, the ones that lead programs, the one that plans programs, the one that's okay with taking the feedback, those are the ones that you can say, okay, you're going to be in leadership. Mm-hmm. And also, they vote who their leaders are in the program.
Oh, that's good.
So I don't just say, it's all peer-led, and they lead each other.
That's good. That's good. And I think it's really important, you said, is some people are like, oh, I'm a leader, but nobody respects you.
Nobody respects you.
And nobody's following you.
That part.
That's real. And, people often will say, oh, ask questions about leadership. And that's, my children, all those things. And I always ask them, how are you leading?
Ooh.
Like, how do you lead? Like, it's because you're listening to people and you're sympathetic to what's going on in their lives, and so therefore they trust you? Or is it because they're like, this person has a great vision, as you said, and I want to kind of be like this person, or I want to be around this person because they're going to help me stay on the right track or course. And so I think that those are really important qualities of leadership. And I think that we as parents have to realize that the younger that we can encourage our children to lead and follow and listen and learn how to be respected, then that is going to really change their trajectory.
Absolutely.
Because when you're 15 and I'm like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you have zero vision. And I'm like, what does the future look like to you? Like, do you see yourself with children? Do you see yourself working? Do you see yourself living here? And they see nothing. Those are the children that I actually worry about even more, because like our suicide rates have been increasing.
Absolutely.
Right. And then when you're a child who sees no future,
come on,
then it's like that's also a red flag to me. If you were in the wrong situations and things like that, you're not seeing what the future would be like. And I'm always like, well, how did we get like this? And I feel like a lot of it has to do with lack of exposures.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I love you all's programs, because it's forcing, children to just be exposed to something. Absolutely. Which is going to make, it's going to make you think of something and do something. And I know people are like, well, they're watching these videos, so they're being exposed to things, but there's hands-on learning so much different than watching something, and that you never even process as being a part of your life,
Well, that's the difference between a theorist, right, and someone who's experienced. Like, give me that person that's willing to take the experience versus someone that says, oh, I think I can. I read about it. I watched that video, and now I'm a doctor. Yeah, I diagnosed myself, and now I'm an MD. I was on WebMD, and now, based on what I read, those people who scare me the most.
That's true.
Because the difference between a conversation and an argument is the voice that's heard the most. If you're talking and all you hear is your voice, there's no learning happening. There's no exchange of growth. And so for me, helping them define what it means to be an example and also setting an example for them, that's what I'm after. I'm not perfect, but I am consistent. I am present. And that's what it's about. It's just being present in that moment, whatever moment that is.
Right. And that's an excellent point, because a lot of times we're so busy, we forget when to be present. And so we may miss the moment in which we were supposed to be present.
Yeah.
I think that actually happened to me the other day. My child asked me some question, and I was trying to respond to somebody. And then he said it again, and I was like, put my phone down. I was like, oh my God, I think I just missed this huge moment. I wasn't even present for it. So I'm like, please repeat it. Please repeat it so I can do what I'm supposed to do. And so just, even as adults, just trying to make sure that when our children are talking, or other youth and things like that, that we stop and we are present, because you just never know. You may kind of blow them off because you're doing something, but you had no intention to do that. Like, if you had actually been listening to what they said, then you would have responded in a much different manner, being supportive, encouraging, reassuring, whatever, based on what they said. It's not easy, as I tell people, to work with youth. It's not easy to be a parent, but acknowledging and realizing that we play such a huge role in who they become.
Yeah. That's good. That's good right there.
It's, it makes you go, well, what's my work here, right? I've been entrusted with this human being for whatever reason, right? They may not be your child, but they're in your presence. So you're been entrusted with them.
If I can't help you, I won't hinder you. I won't hold you back.
Right.
So I'm going to be a helpmate to get you to where you desire to go.
Right. So. And if I can't, and if I'm not the person who right then can help you, I'm going to help find someone who can. Absolutely. Right. And that's what we also have to be willing to do and to say. I think that so often we keep children from being able to do things to explore because of our own fears. And because we may not know what it's about. I put my kids in aerospace camp this summer. I don't know anything. Right.
I appreciate that too, by the way. Appreciate that.
Right. And they came back just teaching me so much. Yeah. And now my son is like, I think I might be interested in being a pilot.
Yeah.
And so exposure is just so huge and crucial to helping them just process and become better human beings.
And I was like, hey, next time, I'm going to get you a drone next time so we can go to another level. That's to me what it's about, is the village. Mm-hmm. Because without a village, you're just one-sided, one-minded. You got to be exposed to things you don't know about. Definitely. And so if someone who ever interacts with children, I do
encouraging. Some people are like, I don't feel like mentoring, and that's okay. But just when they are in your presence, see what pearls, what jewels and things that you can drop, or just listening, being that adult who they can, give feedback to. You're just listening, and maybe you say a few words, being as short as possible, which is not easy, but making sure that you're allowing them to kind of express themselves. So just kind of wrapping up things, what are some, any last thoughts or anything that you would like to share with our listening?
Know the difference in the relationship. Determine if you want to be the advisor or the mentor. You can't mentor everyone, but you can give good advice. And so just understanding you're not called for everyone, but you're called for someone. So if you can reach one, that's one person that's doing less disruptive behavior. So just be the change you need to see.
Yes, I appreciate that. Be the change you need to see. And we all need to see a lot of change. And so if we can all play our part, then we'll really help these youth develop these resilient minds that they are going to need as they go forward in this world that is ever, ever changing. And so they have to be able to change with it. So thank you so much, Dr. Lampkin, for joining me today. And thank you all for listening. And again, I'm Dr. Jihan with Raising Resilient Minds. Take care.